Hey there guys, so we've got a new theme song. Big thanks to Nate Jones for putting that together. I really like it. It makes me think of when Voltron transforms. Let us know in the comments below what you think of it. Couldn't really play fast and loose by playing pop songs at the start of all the videos because eventually YouTube will just start taking them down, so you know. Also, I just want to say a huge thanks to everybody who commented, voted and liked my submission to So You Think You Can Sort, to Sword, not Sort. So You Think You Can Sort is a different competition about organising. So You Think You Can Sword, sorry. Yeah, my submission to that. I got a lot of really positive feedback, way more than I thought I would. You know, a lot of really encouraging people out there, which was just great. I'm not used to that in the YouTube comments section. So I recently finished reading Nevernight by J. Kristoff. It is an awesome fantasy book. It's got gratuitous violence, you'll laugh, you'll cry, the world is really well built, the characters are rich and believable. It's a great read. One of the characters that you encounter is a guy called Solace, who's a blind weapons master. And it got me to thinking about how often we see this in films and fiction. You know, a martial artist who's so good he doesn't even need to see his opponent. So while I was thinking about doing this video, I started thinking about this great 80s film, Blind Fury, with Rutger Hauer, and it really bummed me out because I completely forgot that he died recently. I loved Rutger Hauer. He was in Ladyhawke. It's one of my all-time favourite films, Blade Runner, and I don't know why he went from films like that to suddenly just being a guy in a suit in Batman and some weird pervert cannibal pope in Sin City. And this got me to thinking about whether or not there were any examples historically of any blind swordsmen or martial artists who were so good they could rely on their other senses. I'm aware that there's fencing for the visually impaired as part of the Olympics, but in that instance both fencers are blind, and I'm kind of looking at something a little bit more martial here. Now, there are plenty examples of warriors with poor eyesight or who were blinded in one eye. Hannibal, for example, famously went blind in one eye while crossing the Alps into Italy during his invasion of Rome. But what about warriors who were completely blind? The answer is yes, John I of Bohemia, or as he was better known, John the Blind. John I went blind when he was about 40, and presumably he wasn't called John the Blind up until that point. Also, I've got to wonder if that was something that people called him at the time, you know, like to his face. They're like a Bran the Broken situation where it's like, yeah, we're going to call you Bran the Broken from now on. Yeah, could you not? I'm actually quite self-conscious about the fact that I can't. Yeah, Bran the Broken. At the age of 50, John the Blind was at the Battle of Crécy, and seeing that his son was in... hearing that his son was in danger. That's a bit dark. Hearing that his son was in danger, he decided to charge into the battle despite the fact that he was blind, which is nails! But he died. Spoiler alert, yeah, he didn't survive that battle. The story goes that Edward the Black Prince, learning of this act of valour and bravery, took the symbol of John I of Bohemia as his own, the three feathers, and it became thereafter the symbol of the English princes of Wales. This is one of those stories I'm not sure how true it is. I would love for it to be true. That is so badass. So I was thinking about it from a martial arts standpoint, whether or not it would be possible to fence without eyesight. And one of the things that I kept thinking about was it might be possible from the bind. And one of the things that we learn and develop in historical European martial arts is fooling or feeling. The swords bind, basically where they come together and cross, and we respond to the pressure from our opponent accordingly. For a really good example of this, I would recommend watching the video I put together about a tall versus short fencer between myself and Vina Zand. Fooling or feeling, as the name implies, is more about feeling the pressure than seeing the position of the swords. So in theory it would be possible for a blind fencer to fight from the bind. So I figured I'd have a go at fighting blind.
So you can sort of think of the bind as being similar to pushing hands in Tai Chi, if you're familiar with that. And like I said, just responding to your opponent's pressure. I found this really hard to begin with. Melissa was just shooting her thrust through the bind. Whenever I tried to do the same, I just kept missing for the most part. And yeah, whenever I moved into grapple, I was so slow because I didn't know what I was grabbing at. So yeah, more often than not, I ended up with Melissa's point just kind of sliding down and thrusting into my mask, or there catching me in the hands. I was able to just get one decent shot there. Moving forward, we had a sort of linear fight. I knew that Melissa was standing in front of me, so for the most part, I was just kind of throwing in attacks and hoping for the best. Whenever I did just sort of stand there and listen, I'd just get twatted in the head. A lot of the time, I was just kind of throwing in attacks in a sort of pattern that I know works. Melissa and I fight a lot, so we generally fall into a pattern anyway, because, you know, lockdown, she's the only person I get to fight. And there I just sort of charge forward, and I was just kind of lucky. Now, Melissa gets free range, she can move around, and she just bonks me on the head the whole time, or, you know, puts in a cheeky thrust. She said that it was quite disconcerting, because at some points I was just sort of wailing around the place. But for the most part, the biggest challenge for her was to not laugh at me. I found this really, really difficult. And again, trying to listen for my opponent it would get me, I'd end up in the right direction, but then I'd be too slow to react. So it was only like there where I was a whirling dervish did I actually land anything.
Is it possible to fence blindfolded? Or blind? Yes! I wouldn't do it though. I got hit in the head a lot. Coming to the bind, I was able to get a couple of okay strikes against Melissa. The problem is that when your opponent moves to either side of the blade, you can certainly feel the pressure in the bind, but putting in a thrust, you might miss them completely. So you can absolutely respond to how much presence there is in the bind, but you're not really sure of where your target is. Now, granted, I can't speak for heightened senses and what kind of difference that would make. I found that every time I tried to listen for my opponent, Melissa would just step around me and wallop me in the bonce. But again, I'm not actually blind, so I don't have the benefit of heightened senses. If you were in a narrow corridor, it might also be possible. If your opponent is forced to remain in front of you and you just keep throwing in attacks and force them to defend themselves, then you might stand a chance. But if your opponent has free reign to move around, you're probably gonna die. Now, if you enjoyed this video, that's great news. It gave me something to do during lockdown and prevented me from losing my mind for at least a week. If you could hit like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate your support for the channel. Now, what I want to know is, who's your favourite blind martial artist? I think mine is definitely Toph from Avatar: The Last Airbender.